To suggest that we as Americans are busy, I think would be an overstatement. Uh, the average American runs from one thing to the next, having little time to breathe, let alone any time to actually rest. Our jobs are demanding. Employers expect that we are efficient and that we do more than our share of the workload as a sign of solidarity with the organization. We often take on extra responsibilities at work so that we can be seen as a good employee and maybe position ourselves for the next raise or promotion. We finish a long day's work, even if we're working from home, and we find that family responsibilities are still hanging over our heads. In fact, they could have always been there as we're helping kids with school from home and navigating all of the things that this new world has brought us. But even when we're done with work, it's still there. Perhaps we still have volunteer responsibilities, or we work with our church in a way that takes some extra time. We run errands in the evening to make sure we have groceries in the fridge, oil in the car, clothes on our back. We want light bulbs in the ceilings. We make dinner frantically, hoping to have a few minutes with loved ones and not feel, hopefully, that we're terribly disconnected from one another. We check work email, we collapse in front of the TV, and we spend the last waking minutes sort of catching up on whatever Netflix thing we're binging. And then we fall asleep only to wake up the next morning and do it all over again, right? And even in this pandemic, even in this time where things have been taken away from us as far as accessibility of what we can do, movie theaters are closed, restaurants are still limited capacity. Many people are working from home, and so they don't even have the commute anymore. But even in a COVID world where we're forced to slow down, forced to not do as much, we still are just as busy as we were before. It's just a different kind of busy. Projects around the house and the yard call our name. Commitments with church or commitments with our kids, they all suck up time, even on the weekends. And I'm not too far off, right? I mean, even if we have pockets of rest here or there, for the most part, our lives are dictated by the to-do list that's never ending and always calling for our attention. In addition, most of us live with a massive need to produce more. And that the decision to stop, to actually slow down and do nothing feels like laziness. It feels like a betrayal of our need to get things done. We're afraid that others will think we are, in fact, lazy and that we're not committed or not invested. One of my favorite authors, Anne Lamott, tells this great story of walking along the wharf in San Francisco with her son, Sam. Sam was a young child at the time, and Anne's in a hurry to make a radio interview on time, and Sam, her young son, is not feeling the same sense of urgency that Anne is. He's distracted, he's slow, he's dawdling along as young children often do. And as she attempts to hurry him along, she loses grip on this big tote she's carrying, and all of its contents dump out all around them. She's frantic, she's frustrated at Sam, she's angry, she's worried that they're going to be late. And Sam, seeking all of this take place, he chastises her and he grabs her by the face and he says, "Mom, you're moving too fast and you're carrying too much." This, I think, pretty much sums up the American life, a way of life to which, by the way, most Christians are subject. And what we're learning is that in spite of our capacity to keep going and going and doing more and more, in spite of all that we were able to accomplish and acquire, people continue to report higher levels of anxiety and exhaustion, along with lower levels of satisfaction and contentment. We are more addicted to stuff than we've ever been. In other words, while we have a greater capacity to accomplish, acquire, and produce in our lives, we are consistently less and less fulfilled and grounded. One of the contributing factors, I think, is that we as humans, we weren't made to operate at the pace at which we run. We weren't made to go and go minute after minute, moving from one item on our to-do list to the next. In the story of the Hebrew people, one of the earliest commandments that God gave to the Israelites after God rescues them from slavery in Egypt, and as God's leading them through the desert towards the promised land, was this: remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. Or to put it another way, remember the Sabbath and keep it set apart. Keep this day different from the others. And this isn't because God likes to hand down arbitrary rules to creation. It's because if we run at a constant breakneck speed, we will eventually do what we know is inevitable. We will break down. Farmers know this. If you don't give the soil a break, if you don't rotate crops and eventually give the land a season to replenish itself, a season of rest, your crops will suffer. And the same is true for us. And think about the gift that this had to have been for the Hebrew people coming out of slavery. Every day in Egypt, under the thumb of Pharaoh, was a day of work. Every day they were expected to make more and more with fewer and fewer resources. And having been rescued from the Egyptians, God lays out for them how life under God's reign is different from that of Pharaoh's reign. Remembering the Sabbath and keeping it holy isn't seen as a burden, it's a gift. Are you telling me, God, I don't have to work 7 days a week? I get a day of rest? My animals get a day of rest? My servants get a day of rest? This is a gracious gift from you, God. Because in God's economy, we're no longer defined by what we produce, by what we manage, or by what we acquire. Or as Eugene Peterson puts it, in Sabbath, we are reminded that we are not human doings, we are human beings. For some of us, we might need this gift because the demands are just too much, and we seldom, if ever, get a break. Sabbath is a welcome break from the demands of our week. But for some of us, we might need this gift because somewhere along the way, our identity became rooted by what we can accomplish, not who we actually are. And for those of us who fall in this category, learning how to rest is threatening because we don't know who we are apart from the work that we accomplish, the stuff that we do. We also learn in Sabbath what it means to make room for others. It's not just the Hebrew people who get a rest, all of creation does. So we take a break in order to learn how to be more interruptible, to not be bound by our to-do list, but rather to learn to be present to others. In Sabbath, we practice what it means to free up our own resources in order to help those who don't have the freedom to take a break. But let's be honest, right? This is really, really hard work. We don't feel like we have the disposable time to take a rest. Taking a morning or an afternoon to rest feels highly unlikely, let alone taking a whole day, which feels impossible. But here's why it's so important to still do the difficult work of rest, the difficult work of Sabbath. First, as I've already said, it's better for you. You're going to be more rested. You're going to be more centered. You'll find you have time to do the things that you actually care about that are more life-giving. But Sabbath rest also allows you to pay better attention to your own emotional landscape. When we remove all of the noise of projects and technology and the work that we do, we're often left over with just ourselves. And while this can be painful, it does allow for us to attend to that which we might keep buried. So first things first, to practice rest, to engage in some sort of Sabbath rhythm, you're going to be better off. But secondly, all those things to which you give your attention, right? Your work, your family, your church, your faith community, your neighborhood, your spouse, your children, your loved ones, and the list goes on and on. Out of Sabbath rest, which is harder to say than some might think, out of Sabbath rest, you will actually be able to give more of yourself to these things and these people because you'll be more grounded, you'll be more centered, you'll be more rested. So even if it feels like you might be neglecting these things, you're actually attending to them with greater passion, care, and intentionality because you're able to give your full self to them, not some fragmented, frazzled, and exhausted version of yourself. Finally, in Sabbath rest, you're more likely to discover those things that you actually care about. I've spent a good deal of time in my life with people who are in their last days. And it doesn't matter whether they're people of faith or not. You never hear someone who is about to die say, "Oof, I really wish I would have worked more. I really wish I would have finished that series on Netflix," or "I wish I would have finished the projects around the house," or "Boy, if only I could have put a few more hours of overtime in the organization. That would have been great." That's not what they say. You know what they say, right? "I wish I had just one more day with my family. I wish I could sit across the table and share one more meal with my friends. I wish I could sit on a porch with a cup of coffee with my spouse and rock in our chairs. We don't even have to say anything." These are the things that people wish they'd given more of their time to and with, and Sabbath actually creates the space for this very thing to happen. So where does Sabbath begin? Where do we begin with this practice? So traditionally, it begins at sundown on Friday, goes to sundown on Saturday, during which time you're not supposed to do work, you don't cook, you don't use technology. And depending on what stream of Judaism one falls in, there's a whole bunch of other different rules and regulations that flow out of that. And I'm not going to suggest that we have to do that. You have to stick to Friday evening to Saturday evening. But I would suggest you pick one block of time a week. Perhaps it's a 4-hour block in the morning or in the afternoon. Perhaps it's an early evening, and just simply rest. Don't watch television. Don't get on your computer or your phone. Don't do work, either the work for which you get paid or work around the house. Sit down and drink a cup of coffee. Go on a walk. Sit in your favorite chair and journal. Spend time with a spouse or a child or a good friend. Play a game with somebody if you're able to do it socially distanced. And here's what I want to invite you to do is try it once. And then do it again the next week. And you might find that absolutely nothing really spectacular happens. You might even find it boring and a complete waste of time. But I guarantee you that with time, you'll find yourself longing for that block of time every week. You'll find yourself grateful for that moment in your week where you are no longer defined by what you produce or accomplish. You'll find yourself with a greater capacity to invest in your work and in your family and in your community precisely because you've learned how to rest from them. And you'll find yourself more attuned to the things, and in particular, you'll find yourself attuned to the people that you really care about. Sam was right. We move too fast and we carry too much, but it doesn't have to be that way. We can do the difficult work of Sabbath, and in this work, the world becomes just a little bit more of how God intended it to be.